So if you're trying to start a business and you don't have the initial capital, but you have paid off property, then there is a way that you could access the funding. Because you see, when you go to a normal bank, in most cases, if you tell them, I'm looking to start a new business and I need funding, as we know, the banks are not going to give you the funding. But then you could change that around, and instead of going to the bank and asking them to give you funding for the business, you take your property and you refinance it. Now, this obviously only makes sense if you have affordability. If you don't have affordability, then you will have an issue. There are other companies, like there's a company that I've been helping raise finance, but this is a more commodities company, and they need to raise a certain amount of money, and they do have a paid off property. But even with some of the bridging companies, there were issues raising the money because there was absolutely zero trading record, so no history of trading, and they just saw it as being too risky. Because you see, if you deal with legitimate bridging finance companies, they are not loan sharks. So they will not just take your property for the sake of taking the property and then giving you the money and setting you up for failure. They also want to see that there's a good business case behind it, that you actually know what you're doing. So they might not ask you for 3 years of financials, but they might say, listen, show us maybe 6 months of financials, that you know what you're doing. But one of the solutions that one of these companies gave or offered, the client, was they said this. They said, because you've got a paid off property, we won't fund you directly on the business. What we'll do is we'll take the property, we'll buy it from you at a maximum of 50% of whatever the value of the property is. So if the property is worth, let's say, 2 million rand, they will then buy it for 1 million rand, and they would give that money as a loan to the person making the application. And then there's a rental payment, so they call it a rental payment. So there's a rental payment that gets made. It's almost as if you're now renting this property back. And it's normally equivalent to about 3% or 4% a month of whatever the amount is. So if it's 1 million rand loan, then you're paying about 30,000 or 40,000 a month, which would then be paid from this business that you would now have started because they gave you this money. And at the end of the term, so after 6 months or 1 year, depending on the loan term that was given or the agreement that you reached with them, there's a clause in the agreement that says you have the right to buy the property back at the same price that they sold it to you for. So if they sold it to you for, or if you sold it to them for 1 million, they buy it back from you for 1 million rand. Right? So basically you would be equal. The only profit that you would have, basically they make their profit on that monthly payment that you would have been paying them every single month. And that's another way that, some funding companies provide solutions to people who maybe don't have, they don't have all the experience and it's a brand new business, but they do have some unsecured property. That's how you can leverage the property to access funding for a business venture that you have in mind.